Don in London. Hello. April 13th, my video all about recovery from addiction to substance and behaviour. My addictive substance, alcohol, my behaviour, equally addictive around people, places and things. Trying to be in the right place with the right people and the right things. So driven to extremes of trying to fit in rather than just fitting in, just being included, just being part of, rather than trying to either hide away from it or be the number one in what was going on by being outrageous, rebellious, you name it. All character traits which I suspect I learned and also had within me, so nature and nurture. So now, an alcoholic in recovery, finding out it's okay to be with any people, in any place, with anything, just as life is, life on life's terms. And I suppose that's quite a big difference. So I was a problem and in a problem when I was drinking, because it took the edge off me. It was a way of fixing. I became dependent and then completely addicted to behaviour around drink, people, places, things. So these days, In the Solution is better for me, and it's a one-day programme for me. What helped me get to recovery? Family, friends, society, communities, professionals, you name it. And what's helped since? All of those particular people, and also fellowship, and that fellowship is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for it, never can, never will. Full of unique, authentic people who speak for themselves where they will. And nobody speaks for the fellowship. It has no spokespersons as such. So I'm not one. What I know is what works for me. What I see is what I get in meetings, and that is where I get my wisdom. And when I can't go to meetings, I'm just turning my email off. It's making noises. Excuse me sorry about that. What works for me is learning wisdom, and if I can't get to a meeting of AA, I utilise all the literature which has been produced about recovery. It doesn't happen to be AA all the time, and I also utilise or be a part of life where I get the wisdom from other people who help me with recovery and also manage, if that's the right word, or live with other clinical conditions which are chronic. And the good news is I'm still alive today, another day above ground, as many people say. So why does AA help me, or what is it? I'm going to share the AA Preamble from this card, said at every meeting at the beginning, just to remind us why we go. Then a reading from the Daily Reflections book, which is all about step 4 in the 12-step program, doing a self-appraisal, or fearless moral inventory it's called, and then a reading from As Bill Sees It, and maybe a reading from the 24-hour day book. And I will be including in this particular video a couple of paragraphs from this, the 12 steps and 12 traditions, which is very, very helpful in helping me understand how the steps work in my life. So I practice these steps in my life, and the 12 traditions, which is about the fellowship, unity, service and recovery, and keeping it healthy. So we're trying for progress, not perfection, a healthy individual as best can be, with all the other things or complications we may have, and then how to keep fellowship healthy too. And I don't always agree with everything in the fellowship literature, which is quite right, because nobody always agrees with everything in life, and we are allowed to have our own personal opinions on how we live in recovery. It's actually probably the first time in our lives we realise we really do have freedom of choice around the life situation we have today. And in the past, my life situation has been very bleak, or completely out of proportion to maybe what other people had or may have had. So not a mega rich person, but certainly very comfortable at some stages, through to abject homelessness and nothingness. And that means an empty person inside. So I tend to hope for emptiness at the beginning of the day, and then see how things fill up during the day with good things or bad things, just as life offers. So how does fellowship help me? Unity, service and recovery is the name of the game, I suppose, but it's not a game. It's absolutely about living life in the moment. So the AA Preamble, I share it and read it rather than recite it, because then I'm slowing myself down to talk about now. So, AA. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So it's all about experience of life, strength and hope of what works. And also the sad bits too, where it didn't work, or we didn't know how to cope. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So, drunk or not, a meeting is always there, somewhere nearby, hopefully. I'm very fortunate there are a lot where I am, so I have lots of choice. So a desire to stop drinking is all it is. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. So we don't have to pay for this, it's free, but we do try and contribute to pay rent, make tea, coffee, do all the usual things any meeting would do, AA or not. And then maybe some money left over for literature, so we can share the message in a different format, if you like. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. But within the fellowship, everybody has affiliations and ideas, and opposes or endorses causes, because that's our freedom of choice. But we try to keep on a straight and narrow when it comes to fellowship. It's about sobriety and sharing a message. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And in there can be great misunderstandings, because with the 12-step program and 12 traditions, it can sound like we're being fastened down to a way of life which is quite dull and boring. And the answer is it's not. If we're dull and boring people, probably we might have a dull and boring life. But life ain't like that. You know, if we engage in life as it is, our feelings happen, good or bad. We have feelings, and we have an opportunity to live in reality, because we're sober and not fixing our feelings or trying to fix reality because we don't like it, or trying to make the reality we think we have last longer, which is why a lot of us drank in the first place, because we wanted to be happy. And of course, alcohol, when we're young, it lets down our inhibitions and allows us to maybe take the lid off something which we are inhibited around, our natural instincts for love and everything on the physical and emotional level. That's what we do. We are raging with hormones when we get into our teenage years, and then hopefully they all settle down into their natural proportion for each and every one of us, which can be quite different. But that's another matter. But it is part of step 4, doing our moral inventory, because how often were we bent out of shape by trying to be what we thought we ought to be, or trying to be what we thought the girl or the boy wanted us to be. Girl in my case. Just as it may be, how we are is how we are. So, daily reflections for today, this book. As I say, it covers one step a month. Step 1 in January, all about being powerless over alcohol and life unmanageable when we drink. Step 2, came to believe in a higher power, which would restore us to sanity. And the higher power for me has become truth, love and wisdom of others. Not my opinion, not my necessarily skewed beliefs, but truth, love and wisdom as it manifests on a daily basis. So it keeps on changing, and that's the nature of spiritual. Everything's changing, but there are constants around that. We're all getting older, and with any luck we're getting a bit wiser, often by the mistakes we make. Anyway, for April 13th, it says, the false comfort of self-pity. Self-pity is one of the most unhappy and consuming defects that we know. It is a bar to all spiritual progress and can cut off all effective communication with our fellows because of its inordinate demands for attention and sympathy. It is a maudlin form of martyrdom which we can ill afford. And you know, self-pity comes in many ways, but it often comes out of very bad experiences where we say, we don't deserve this, why did it happen to me? Or we're just experiencing very deep grief about loss. And grief isn't about closure. Learning grief is learning life, as much as learning the happy side of life as it is the sad side. But if we get in the extremes of either way, we can get self-pity or great ego. And self-pity is where I don't deserve this, it shouldn't happen to me. But the problem is, we're just human and it can happen to us. So how do we deal with the tragedy of life? And we can get stuck in deep, overwhelming self-sadness. It goes on to say, the false comfort of self-pity screens me from reality only momentarily and then demands, like a drug, that I take an even bigger dose. If I succumb to this, it could lead to a relapse into drinking. What can I do? One certain antidote is to turn on my attention, however slightly at first, toward others who are genuinely less fortunate than I, preferably other alcoholics. In the same degree that I actively demonstrate my empathy with them, I will lessen my own exaggerated suffering. And you know, when we're really in the pits, because we are experiencing tragedy, it isn't exaggerated suffering, it's just suffering. But if it continues unabated, because we just can't break out of this vicious cycle of grieving to the point of excluding everything else, then we can't find life again. So the most important thing is, when these sort of things happen, we share. And we keep on sharing our grief until we can open up again to listening to other people and their grief. So when we share experience, strength and hope in the rooms of AA, it is about sharing the truth and suffering as much as the joy of recovery, because it's not all bad. Having said that, we can have clinical depression or various forms of reactive depression, which can keep us very much in the dark rather than moving into alternatives and new ways of looking at the world, and letting go the harshness and cherishing the memories. That's, I think, the way it works. Lessening the harshness and cherishing the memories of what we are, who we are, and cherishing that we can change and this day can work in some way. Moving on to as Bill sees it, and focusing on inventorying or judging, we do a self-appraisal, which is great. The 12 steps offer the best form of self-appraisal around our emotional state, our feelings, and our spiritual connection, which is about reality, living reality. But the trouble is, if we get good at dealing with our own inventory, the danger is we do an assessment of other people, and it leads to judgmental ways of looking at people, rather than looking at a person as a going concern who has issues maybe, or no issues. We may judge them as better than us, or less than us. It's not helpful. We need to focus on what's in the mirror. What are we doing today? And how are we living life? And how do we feel included? How do we share? And how do we connect with everything around us? And we can only know that in the moment, and that's called spiritual. But on page 144 it talks about blind trust. It says, blind trust with question mark. Most surely there can be no trust where there is no love, nor can there be real love where distrust holds its malign sway. So if we're distrustful of ourselves and other people, life is undermined because we forget to engage and include ourselves. We keep on moving backwards from it. But does trust require that we be blind to other people's motives, or indeed to our own? Not at all. This would be folly. Most certainly we should assess the capacity for harm as well as the capacity for good, capability for good in every person that we trust, or we would trust. Such a private inventory can reveal the degree of confidence we should extend in any given situation. However, this inventory needs to be taken in a spirit of understanding and love, not in misunderstanding and crushing hate. Nothing can so much bias our judgment as negative emotions of suspicion, jealousy and anger. Having vested our confidence in another person, we ought to let him or her know of our full support. Because of this, more often than not, he or she will respond magnificently and far beyond our first expectations. So, if we do give ourselves the opportunity to trust, and we can't help the judgment side of our nature, because nature built in what we see it, perceive it, and then judge it, so that we automatically have responses to certain situations, like we teach a child to cross the road and look the right way, providing they're not in a different country or in the UK where we seem to do everything road-wise on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side. And I nearly sometimes run over the tourists who are looking left instead of right. I don't want to do that, but it can happen. Now, in this book, 12 and 12, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, certain paragraphs just jump off the page at me when I just open it up. And on page 45 of Step 4, it says this: "We have also seen men and women who go power mad, who devote themselves to attempting to rule their fellows. These people often throw to the winds every chance for legitimate security and a happy life. Whenever a human being becomes a battleground for the instincts, there can be no peace. But that is not all of the danger. Every time a person imposes his instincts or her instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. If the pursuit of wealth tramples upon people who happen to be in the way, then jealousy, anger and revenge are likely to be aroused. If sex runs riot, there is similar uproar. Demands made upon other people for too much attention, protection and love can only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves. Two emotions quite as unhealthy as the demands which evoke them. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or the international conference table, or at the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. In these ways we are set in conflict not only with ourselves but with other people who have instincts too. And when times are hard, even whole communities in society find themselves in revolt against people who feel that they have the right to be governing them. And this happens in families, communities, wherever we are, in work, in relationships, and it's unhealthy rule of instincts. Too much power over, or not enough power, in relationships. That is why AA works quite well, because it is described as an anarchic democracy. So the traditions say unity comes first. At the same time, you can't tell another AA person what to do, and we have to work things out which affect the group or the meeting by getting to a place of agreement, and that can be very, very difficult when people have strong feelings. So we learn tolerance and love. We learn there's a balance and an understanding to be made. So we do get unity, but we don't impinge on the rights of other people, to their outlooks, opinions and beliefs. Otherwise, we would be a cult. That's interesting to say, because a lot of the time people are frightened of fellowship because they feel like something is being taken away from them. And the truthful answer, the only thing being taken away is alcohol, which then takes the lid off the real problem, which is us, and how to live life on a daily basis. If we made it any more than a day, I wonder how well we would survive. So everything revolves around now. That is the spiritual foundation of life, truth in the moment. And sometimes we think our opinion is truth. So everything I say here is personal opinion, and you can decide what is truth for you, and that's just as good as it can be. Truth for you and how it works to be sober. But I do know that I get wisdom from other people on a daily basis, within fellowship and certainly without fellowship. Otherwise there would be no balance in life. And it's all about living life and being in society, and learning how to love and be loved back and useful. And sometimes we can be so far away from that for quite a long time that getting back to a place of balance is only achieved by the day and by the moment. So at the end of these videos I will share my best meditation. It's not my meditation, it's the best meditation I've come across, which works in any moment when life is going well or badly. It's to reflect upon what's happening, what I can do and what I can't do, and learning the wisdom to know the difference. And it's the serenity prayer to God or good conscience. So it must be to the higher power of your understanding, not mine, and it needs to be unique and authentic. That can be a channel of a good conscience or good reflection about the possibilities right now. So the serenity prayer, which is a meditation, and it helps me in any moment where it's too good to be true, or just too awful to be true as well, because it can be denial both ways, and the sooner I get back to reality the better. But denial has its place. Please don't feel that if you're in denial it's a bad thing. It's only when it's at extremes for prolonged periods, like in my drinking days, where I didn't even want to look at what my problem was, because it was too awful to contemplate trying to sort out me, and drink kept me going, fixing myself. So denial came later, when I wasn't so ignorant of my own condition. So we only get to denial when we need it. I can't believe it is where it starts, often around tragedy. So the serenity prayer, which works to see the balance or imbalance in life. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For me, as always, it works, just for today. But I do share about how it helps me, because without AA I don't think I'd be alive today. Simple as that. I'd have gone back to my addictions and perished, blaming the world for my woes. And these days I don't have to blame anything or anybody about how life is. It's just the way it is. So how does AA help me? Well, I share the statement of intent and a little bit of reading. And I'll start with the statement of intent, and then there's something I want to share about AA's 12-pack. The statement of intent, or the AA Preamble, is this. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I was talking about the 12-step package yesterday on one of my videos, and it reminded me that the 12-step pack, or the 12-step package of AA, is the 12-step program. 12 steps of action to change my attitude and behaviour. And in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, which is a literature book from AA, this is just a small handy copy for taking around and reading whenever you like, is the 12-step summary on page 107. And it reads like this, if I have time for it. Right, AA's manner of making ready to receive this gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps in our programme. So let's consider briefly what we have been trying to do up until this point. Step 1 showed us an amazing paradox. We found that we were totally unable to rid the alcohol obsession until we first admitted that we were powerless over it. In Step 2, we saw that since we could not restore ourselves to sanity, some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. Consequently, in Step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him, and as a personal understanding of the higher power and God. For the time being, we who were atheist or agnostic discovered that our own group or AA as a whole would suffice as a higher power. Beginning with Step 4, we commenced to search out the things in ourselves which had brought us to physical, moral and spiritual bankruptcy. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Looking at Step 5, we decided that an inventory taken alone wouldn't be enough. We knew we would have to quit the deadly business of living alone with our conflicts, and in honesty confide these to God and to another human being. At Step 6, many of us bolt, for the practical reason that we did not wish to have all our defects of character removed, because we still loved some of them too much, ego being one of them. Yet we knew we had to make a settlement with the fundamental principle of Step 6, so we decided that while we would still have some flaws of character that we could not yet relinquish, we ought nevertheless to quit our stubborn, rebellious hanging on to them. We said to ourselves, this I cannot do today. Perhaps I can stop crying out, no, never. Then, in Step 7, we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings, such as He could or would under the conditions of the day we asked, just on today. In Step 8, we continued our house cleaning, for we saw that we were not only in conflict with ourselves, but also with people and situations in the world in which we lived. We had to begin to make our peace, and so we listed the people we had harmed, and became willing to set things right. We followed this up in Step 9 by making direct amends to those concerned, except when it would injure them or other people. By this time, at Step 10, we had begun to get a basis for daily living, and we keenly realized that we would need to continue taking personal inventory, and then when we were in the wrong, we ought to admit it promptly. In Step 11, we saw that if the higher power had restored us to sanity, and had enabled us to live with some peace of mind in a sorely troubled world, then such a higher power was worth knowing better, by as direct contact as possible. The persistent use of meditation and prayer, we found, did open the channel, so that where there had been a trickle, there was now a river which led to sure power and safe guidance from God, as we were increasingly better able to understand Him. So, practicing these principles, we had a spiritual awakening about which finally there was no question. Looking at those who were only beginning and still doubted themselves, the rest of us were able to see the change setting in. From great numbers of such experiences, we could predict that the doubter who still claimed that he hadn't got the spiritual angle, and who still considered his well-loved AA group the higher power, would presently love God and call Him by name. And for me, when I actually think about calling God by name, it's not the God of another person's understanding which is important here. What's important is the God of your understanding, and something which is authentic and unique and understandable. And for me, it turned out to be God is truth, God is love, and God works through people. Now, that was a very hard thing for me to do, because everything in my upbringing was about agnostic or atheist. Don't believe in God, take care of yourself, step up the lip, brave face when needed, and ego running riot as much as anything. So when he talked to Step 6, defects of character, my principal defects of character were fear, brave facing and ego. And my principal shortcomings were not enough courage, faith or confidence. So it swings and roundabouts, and it's sort of, we can tip one day or the other, in one way or another in any particular day. So what helps me to know everything about me are the 12 steps, the 12 pack of AA. When it comes to today, though, I always refer to Daily Reflections, this book, and it is one step a month. So, those 12 steps, the 12 pack. Step 4, the fearless moral inventory, the one which maybe a lot of people struggle with to start with, because we have to look at ourselves in some detail and understand where our anger, resentments come from and why we have them. And what we find is we've been angry at the world and not necessarily acknowledging our personal part in it. So when we actually get to understanding our personal part in our lives, that is, trying to run it our way all the time and then blaming the rest of the world for not falling in line, we find that we are not in charge to an extent. All we have is choices based on our life reality, what is real right now. So for April 13th, it says here, the false comfort of self-pity. And we all get this. So, you know, we're not unique and authentic in this. We all have it in different degrees on different days. It says the false comfort of self-pity. Self-pity is one of the most unhappy and consuming defects that we know. It is a bar to all spiritual progress and can cut off all effective communication with our fellows because of its inordinate demands for attention and sympathy. It is a maudlin form of martyrdom which we can ill afford. And it goes on to say, the false comfort of self-pity screens me from reality only momentarily and then demands, like a drug, that I take an even bigger dose. In other words, our behaviour becomes addictive to self-pity. If I succumb to this, it could lead to a relapse into drinking. What can I do? One certain antidote is to turn my attention, however slightly at first, towards others who are genuinely less fortunate than I, preferably other alcoholics. In the same degree that I actively demonstrate my empathy with them, I will lessen my own exaggerated suffering. And the most important part of that is to know it is empathy and not doing good to others. It's about empathy and understanding and not getting in their faces. Anyway, I share at the end of these videos the Serenity Prayer to God or good conscience, as you choose and understand as time goes by. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference for me is just for today. All about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addiction substance was alcohol. My behaviour, trying to be perfect, live up to all the expectations I had of myself and all the expectations the rest of the world had for myself. And it was impossible, an impossible ask, to be all things to all people at all times. And the reason why I felt that way, that you wanted me perfect, was I felt less than, not good enough in some way, and driven by 1,000 forms of fear. I think I was trying to get that out yesterday, but I stuttered over it. 1,000 forms of fear. If I feared something, I could imagine it worse and worse. So these days I'm learning how not to be fearful on a daily basis, because one of my defects of character, well, my primary defects of character, are putting on a brave face, having a brittle ego with nothing behind it, and fear of everything and anything. So what's happened to me over the last few years, I've just learned how to have a bit more courage, faith and confidence on a daily basis, with the help of a fellowship, family, community, society, medical people. And when we're stuck in that place of addiction to either substance or behaviour, it's very, very hard to try and get out of it. And I couldn't do it on my own. I tried self-will. Self-will ran riot. My self-will, my intellect, my thinking kept me drinking. And it's only when I got to understand what my feelings were and why I had them, my feelings, my emotions, I could then find courage, faith and a bit of self-esteem, that I wasn't a complete failure or less than other people, but I had a right to actually make my life work and do it the best I can in one day and keep it in the day and don't have a bigger time frame. So I'm lucky. Excuse me. I'm lucky to have some family about still who look after me and my personal welfare, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I don't mean that I'm dependent. I'm independent, and part of the reason why I'm independent is fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, I don't speak for AA, I only speak about my experience, strength and hope and what it does for me. And you know, sometimes people put comments on my videos about whether AA is good or bad, and usually if a person's had a bad experience of AA, it usually means that somebody's tried to impose their thoughts on another person. And really the way the fellowship works is simply for a person to get their choices back and then choose whether to drink or not, and do that on a daily basis. So excuse me, what does this fellowship do for me? Well, I'll share the preamble, which is read out at the beginning of every meeting of AA I go to here in London, UK. And it goes like this: Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And one of my AA friends has just put up a video all about the statistics, the 95% failure rate of AA. And, you know, where do these statistics come from? They come from surveys which are done ad hoc from time to time. Apparently there is a survey every 3 years of some people within the fellowship, which determines there could be a 95% failure rate. Well, I think it's probably 100% in the first early days of trying to get sober. There are very few people actually come to AA at their first meeting and then find that they have found salvation. Excuse me. Because salvation takes a little bit of effort. Like anything in life, you know, we drank hard to make ourselves feel better. And we live hard and play hard and do things to extremes when we're driven by all those forms of fear, 1,000 forms of fear, and maybe there were 10,000 in my case. I have no idea. I could be frightened of anything. But it kept me isolated and fearful to the point where I couldn't even answer the telephone or open my post or face reality, the reality of me. And, you know, I was very, very lucky that one day it just occurred to me that all the things people had said, I cannot do this on my own. And when I realised I was just as human as the next person, and nobody was trying to make me do it on my own, I asked for help. And it was in that moment of asking for help that I suddenly realised life couldn't get any worse than it is now, but it could get better just one day at a time. And that took me 35 years to get to. And in a place of denial about an awful lot of life and whose fault it was. I was very good at blaming my background, my opportunities and not having the right breaks. But you know what? It's all about our attitude and behaviour when we're first facing adverse living experiences as well as good living experiences. So rather than celebrate with a drink these days, I celebrate with a cup of tea, whether it's a good day or a bad day, because at the end of it, if I'm still sober, it means I'm in the game of living and experiencing life. So that's a bit about my background. Not easy, and this statistical thing can make people angry, because if you're not one of the 5% who get it on the first meeting, how on earth do you feel? Well, you feel excluded. So the answer is, we need not exclude ourselves from something which can help us. What we need to do is listen and experience some sobriety. And that's very hard when driven by a physical craving which is very demanding, and an emotional outlook which says, I want to isolate, I want to exclude, and I want oblivion. And I probably don't want to wake up ever again. That's where we get to. So having got to that stage and then moved along a little bit, I heard all these statistics and I asked myself, what should I apply to me and my life? What will be the right measures for me? And I simply understand my measures these days are one day at the end of it, am I sober? Emotionally, spiritually and physically? And the answer is, to a degree. But I haven't had a drink, and I haven't tried to fix myself on a substance or a particular part of my behaviour. Excuse me, I've got chesty feeling today. So, why am I prompted to say these things? Well, I've had a few emails about how can I help one of my members of family, what can I do with my friend who's like this, and what sort of message can we relay to people? I think simply the best message is to say, you know, if you are addicted to something, either substance or behaviour, and it's doing no end of untold damage, if you try and do it on your own, you're likely to find that it won't work. And willpower is not the answer. But if you actually get in the company of people who have found a means of finding experience, strength and hope to live spiritually, which is in the moment of now, emotionally understanding where we are, and physically not craving that need to fix, then help is at hand. And it need not be AA, it can be anything. So I haven't got around to doing the daily readings. Anyway, the daily reflections, very briefly, in this book today, for April the 13th, it says, "The false comfort of self-pity. Self-pity is one of the most unhappy and consuming defects that we know. It is a bar up to all spiritual progress and can cut off all effective communication with our fellows because of its inordinate demands for attention and sympathy. It is a maudlin form of martyrdom which we can ill afford." And it goes on to say, "The false comfort of self-pity screens me from reality only momentarily, and then demands, like a drug, that I take an even bigger dose. If I succumb to this, it could lead to a relapse into drinking. What can I do? One certain antidote is to turn my attention, however slightly at first, towards others who are genuinely less fortunate than I, just on a daily basis, preferably other alcoholics in need of help. In the same degree that I actively demonstrate my empathy with them, I will lessen my own exaggerated suffering." And when I say, you know, we can all suffer together, or we can all keep well together, it's a bit of all of those things. So the serenity prayer, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, just for today. Hello, good evening, Don in London. All about AA. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I keep on reading that preamble because it's what starts all AA meetings that I attend. And the AA preamble sort of puts us in the mood, if you like, for knowing and understanding where we're going with our next few minutes when we attend a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And really, all the meetings do is reinforce on a daily basis the 12 steps and 12 traditions of how the fellowship works and how to live life more productively, possibly, than we did in the past. And I think most certainly from my own point of view, simply because I don't drink alcohol anymore. And that's the only one I can get right, the first step of AA, which is, admitted we were powerless over alcohol and life had become unmanageable, is the one we can get 100% perfect on a daily basis. And as my sponsor, who was in the meeting with me tonight, they said quite clearly that the reason why they've been able to get to 33 years sober was simply because they do it one day at a time. Deal with life on life's terms, one day at a time, without filters or denials. And the most important filter and denial to get over is our need to drink. So if the program can keep us sober long enough, we start to enjoy life a little bit better day by day by day. And so many of us who take a daily sojourn, if you like, into the fellowship, do it because we know it keeps our head calibrated and focused on recovery, and being recovering rather than discovering alcohol all over again. So it's been a good day for me. I feel very tired tonight, and that's partly due to the diabetes and what's going on there, or what's not going right there at the moment. So I have to be a bit more watchful about my blood sugars. and how it impacts on my mood and my daily life. So the good news is I'm in recovery. The good news is I was alive long enough to get some more unfortunate ailments along the way, and I do get tired and fatigued, extremely so, and I think that is part of just the conditions I live with. So life is not a bowl of cherries all the time. Coming on to the readings for tomorrow, February the 14th, and just before I do that, I went and got some food from the local supermarket, and the sales assistant was brightly suggesting I buy some flowers for tomorrow, because it's the 14th of February, and it's Valentine's Day, and I'm very pleased to say that I had to decline the offer because I'm still sorting myself out, and I don't have a girlfriend, and that's not me looking for one either, it's just being truthful. And when I said, before I buy some flowers, I'd best find myself a girlfriend, she smiled and said, one day. And that's just what it is, you know, it's one day at a time, and who knows what might happen tomorrow. I don't know, we shall see. I don't expect any cards, that's for sure. I've been out of circulation for quite a while. Anyway, coming on to the daily reflections for tomorrow, February the 14th. Daily reflections written by AA people for AA people. Expectations versus demands. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. AA's Big Book, page 98. And as you know, my understanding of God these days is God is truth. But he goes on to say, dealing with expectations is a frequent topic at meetings. It isn't wrong to expect progress of myself, good things from life, or decent treatment from others. Where I get into trouble is when my expectations become demands. I will fall short of what I wish to be, and situations will go in ways I do not like, because people will let me down sometimes. The only question is, what am I going to do about it? Wallow in self-pity or anger, retaliate and make a bad situation worse? Or will I trust in God's power to bring blessings on the messes in which I find myself? Will I ask him what I should do, what I should be learning? Do I keep on doing the right things I know how to do, no matter what? Do I take time to share my faith and blessings with others? Well, yes, because here I am on YouTube trying to share a message of experience, strength and hope. And really all I'm doing is extending this modem to modem, as is suggested in the 4th edition, in the 4th preface or foreword. So, in my own strange, inimitable way, and I don't recommend it for anybody else, this is just me doing it my way, and the suggestions are what they are. So, coming on to as Bill sees it, Bill Wilson being one of the co-founders of AA. 14th of February, two-way tolerance. Your point of view was once mine. Fortunately, AA is constructed so we need not debate the existence of God, but for best results, most of us depend upon a higher power. You say the group is your higher power, and no right-minded AA would challenge your privilege to believe precisely that way. We should all be glad that good recoveries can be made even on this limited basis. This is where I get a bit confused sometimes, because I like AA being my higher power, and I like the idea of God as truth. So it continues, but turnaround is fair play. If you would expect tolerance from your point of view, I'm sure you would be willing to reciprocate. I try to remember that. Down through the centuries, lots of brighter people than I have been on both sides of this debate about belief. For myself, of late years, I'm finding it much easier to believe that God made man than man made God. And, you know, without reading this, I thought I was the one who came up with the phrase, man made God and God made man. I didn't. It was already out there. So I picked it up somewhere. But you see, for me, man made God and God made man. It's synonymous with an understanding of what is life. And as Gandhi said, for me, God is truth, and belief, courage, faith in truth are my keystones to recovery, and I get my wisdom where? from around the world and also AA. The world informs me of how life can be, and it's then up to me, with a bit of courage, faith and confidence, rather than being fearful, putting on a brave face and doing things which I may be less, I suppose, inclined to do. If I follow the truth, I'm more in line and on track, and that always keeps me in the right space. Coming on to the 24-hour day book, a Hazelden publication by an AA person, but not endorsed by AA. And this is the thing about my blog. It is me and my recovery. I don't speak for AA, but I speak a lot about AA because AA saved my life. So it would be foolish or impudent of me to actually suggest that I made my recovery happen. And indeed, so many elements of people in life and understanding and being given the opportunity to just find my way one day at a time has made it all possible. So there you go. Partly AA, partly the rest of the world had an impact. So February the 14th, thought for the day. After the first drink we had a single track mind. It was like a railroad train. The first drink started it off and it kept going on the single track until it got to the end of the line. Drunkenness. We alcoholics knew this was the inevitable result when we took the first drink, but still we couldn't keep away from liquor. Our willpower was gone. We had become helpless and hopeless before the power of alcohol. It's not the second drink or the 10th drink that does the damage, it's the first drink. Will I ever take that first drink again? And, you know, my first drink was many, many years ago. It was probably far too early and far earlier than the law allowed, even back in the day. And what I know now is I cannot change my feelings by drinking and make it work again. So just one day at a time, I'm playing it sober with a lot of help from my friends.